All right, welcome to the TBD Sportscast, Week 14 Playoff Rankings Reaction. This is Mason. I'm here with Isaac. This one was interesting. This week was interesting. This past weekend in college football was interesting. If you listen to our Rivalry Week Reaction podcast that we released on Monday, you'll know that this weekend was pretty freaking crazy. On Sunday, after these games, I tried to put together my own prediction of what the college football playoff rankings were going to be this Tuesday. I got some of them close, not exact, but man, I tell you what, I've done that a couple weeks in a row, pretty much since the playoff rankings have started, but this one was so difficult to try to put together. I mean, you had so many top teams drop, like Clemson dropped a loss to South Carolina, Oregon lost one to Oregon State, FSU got a big win against Florida, Notre Dame dropped a loss to USC. I mean, it was just really hard to predict, and I had no idea where they were going to put South Carolina. I had no idea which teams they were going to drop out and bring in. This weekend was just absolutely crazy. But as far as our thoughts and our, pretty much basically live reactions to this playoff ranking, NC State and Mississippi State get in right at the cusp after beating their respective rivals, both on the road. And NC State actually beat North Carolina in overtime by 3 points. Michigan State beat Ole Miss in a close one by 2. It was decided on a late 2-point try. Ole Miss tried to go for 2. They were down 2, didn't get it with like a minute and a half left to go with no timeouts, and all Mississippi State had to do was receive the kickoff and take some knees, and that was it. They won the Egg Bowl. That one was interesting for sure. Finally, South Carolina getting the respect they've earned. Not the respect they deserve, the respect they've earned. Beating 2 top 10 teams in 2 weeks is insane. It's crazy. And, I mean, honestly, I don't know where they came from because they lost by 30 to Florida 3 weeks ago. The next week, they come out of nowhere, beat Tennessee, number 5 Tennessee, by 30 points. And then this past weekend, they knock off Clemson on the road in Death Valley by 1 point, knocking off a 40 at-home win streak for Clemson and a 7-game win streak since 2013 for Clemson. I mean, they just knocked them off, dude. And I mean, they've earned it. I don't know where they came from, but Spencer Rattler had 2 amazing games. I mean, they just turned the team around. It's like Shane Beamer said, man. It's like this team is good. He's been trying to tell us. So I got to give the props to South Carolina. The college football playoff committee ranked them at 19, and honestly, I think that's a perfect spot for them.
Yeah, Mason, I agree. I'm sitting here thinking about it. Rattler threw two big picks that really could have thrown the game, in another direction, but the defense stepped up. And we can talk all day about Clemson's lack of offense throughout the season and DJ's lackluster performance throughout the year. But all in all, South Carolina went into Clemson and they earned that win. I mean, they were down by 2 points for most of the game, which you could almost solely pin on that bizarre safety by South Carolina earlier on, and then they were able to score when they needed to. Defense came up big, and I mean, huge props to the Cox, man.
And something I didn't get to say on our episode on Monday was that people kept saying, well, South Carolina didn't have a great game. Spencer Rattler threw 2 interceptions. It's like, well, yeah, and DJ threw a pick, and then their special teams on a kickoff and a punt fumbled and turned the ball over. And one of those was, I mean, it was too late to come back at that point because you on the punt return with 2 minutes left, down 1 point, you fumble the ball back into South Carolina's hands. They get a first down. They take a couple knees. But the difference between the two teams is, how did they come back? South Carolina, yeah, Rattler threw a pick in the first and the second half. And what did he do? He balled out and got the lead, got ahead, drove the team downfield, and responded and did something correct. When Clemson had those stupid turnovers, they didn't do anything magnificent. They didn't make any huge downfield plays. They didn't have, 60, 70-yard runs like Michigan had on Ohio State. They didn't really respond. They just they tried to coast. And Joey said that. Joey said it's almost like they just tried to coast, like they just tried to play well enough to win, but it wasn't. There was no changes made. There was no desire. It honestly, I think the perfect word to describe Clemson's team defensively and offensively is lackluster. So I'm glad that South Carolina got ranked. I honestly thought they should have been ranked last week at 25 after they beat Tennessee at home. But I'm glad that they're getting the respect they've earned. And with that being said, I expected Clemson to drop lower They were number 8 last week, and the committee only moved them down to 9. In my personal prediction, I had them going to 13. I mean, they didn't even drop out of the top 10 after losing to an unranked opponent at home. I guess South Carolina's win against Tennessee the week before maybe shot them up in the eyes of the committee, so it didn't seem like as big of a loss. I mean, they only did lose by 1 point, but they had some pretty, like I said, terrible turnovers, and I expected Clemson to drop more.
I mean, yeah, and truthfully, Mason, I'm sitting here looking at the rankings, and to lose, this is no disrespect to South Carolina, but to lose to a 7-4 team, now 8-4, South Carolina, at home when you are the big bad Clemson that's been a top 8, top 6, top 4 team for 8-9 years now. I mean, it's kind of honestly, it's just kind of you should be expected to held to a higher standard, in my opinion. I agree with you. Even the AP had them at 10. I think that's probably fair. Anywhere from 10 to 12-ish. I think you had a good prediction at 13. But anyway, outside of the top 9 spots is probably where Clemson should have fell to. But they came in at 9 on the CFP. They came in at 10 on the AP, and that's just where they ended up falling to. Even though we may disagree.
I think that Clemson probably should have fallen a little lower than they did. Here's a good question: should Tennessee be ranked above Alabama? This has been a hot button topic, and a lot of people have a lot of different thoughts. Let Isaac give his first.
So, Mason, this is a great question, and I am super excited about this. I'm sitting here rubbing my hands together like a witch as I read this, because here's the thing. Tennessee beat Alabama. So, in all reality, I think they should be ahead of them. But you have to look at Tennessee's one of Tennessee's losses being a 25-point handling to an unranked team. I think that's the difference. They lost to Georgia by 2 touchdowns when Georgia, obviously, they're in a league of their own. They're a clear number 1 team. They're a clear, champion. But you look at Alabama's 2 losses. One of them was by 1 point to LSU in overtime. The other was to Tennessee by a field goal. So in all reality, Tennessee, when you look at the head-to-head, should probably be ranked above Alabama. But the fact that Tennessee lost by almost 4 touchdowns to an unranked South Carolina team in Columbia weekend before last, I think that's the reason that they're below Alabama. So it could go either way, but I think Tennessee's loss to South Carolina is what did them in at number 7 instead of 6.
And that is the thought process, right? Well, Tennessee has the head-to-head. They should be ranked above Alabama. But another thing you're forgetting is this. Hendon Hooker is out for the season. While Joe Milton played pretty incredible against Vandy, it's Vandy. Who's to say that Joe Milton could come out and play the way he did against Vandy against Georgia? Put up 300 yards passing. I mean, especially when Jalen Hyatt didn't get, he got 1 pass for 30-plus yards. 1 against Georgia. Okay? I think that's another big thing. I mean, Hendon Hooker didn't do it either, obviously. But I think Hendon Hooker would have been the better quarterback in that situation between him and Joe Milton. I think that not having Hendon Hooker is a big factor to why they're not ranked above Alabama. Because I think that they have a pretty good argument to be ranked above Alabama. They had a really bad handling by South Carolina. But they responded really well. They came back the next week against Vandy, who we thought was going to be a close game, or at least score a point, and didn't allow them to score a single point, not even a field goal. Personally, I think Tennessee should be ranked below Bama. I want to say they should be ranked above because of the head-to-head, but I just don't think it's. I mean, when you only take that into consideration, Bama has no losses to unranked SEC teams. They have no close losses to unranked SEC teams. They have really, really, really close losses to ranked SEC teams, one of which who won the West and is going to play the winner of the East in the SEC Championship this weekend. I hate that for Tennessee. Not really, because, don't like Tennessee, but, it is what it is, man, and I think that's right. Let's take a look at some of the top 6 playoff implications coming into championship weekend. Georgia, they're a lock, even if they lose. Even if LSU beats them, they're a lock. They're going to the playoffs. I think Caesars Sportsbook has like a 99% chance they make it. Michigan, they're a lock, even if they lose. If Purdue comes into the Big Ten championship and they win and knock off Michigan, they still have a spot. TCU, they're a lock, even if they lose. A lot of people have been saying that they're not, but they are. I truly think that TCU is a lock, even if they lose. Now, we're going to get back to TCU in a second. But first, Ohio State. Ohio State does have a path to the playoff. If USC loses to Utah in the Pac-12 championship, Ohio State's going to get in. Because at that point, Ohio State will have 2 losses to the same team. Utah beat USC in the regular season. So USC's 1 loss is to Utah. If they lose twice, they're out. They're out. And Ohio State will get that spot, I have no doubt. Because they're only a 1-loss team, with their only loss being to number 3 Michigan. Now, it was a blowout at home, but still. Now, Alabama. Their path to the playoff is impossible. 0%. You know how I know? Because the committee ranked them at 6 instead of 5. If they would have been ranked at 5, it would have told us that the committee wants Alabama to be in the playoffs if a team above them gets knocked out. All right? They have no chance in the playoff. Boo Corrigan, the chair of the CFP committee, said on the ranking show last night that the way the teams are stacked up right now, things will not change, meaning Alabama cannot jump Ohio State or anyone else for that matter for a spot. They're at where they're at. They have 2 losses. No other team ahead of them has 2 losses. Only one. There's 1 losses and undefeateds. If they wanted to get in, they should have beat Tennessee or LSU. Here's the thing. Even if TCU and USC were to lose, Bama is not getting in. And now we'll get back to TCU. People have been saying if TCU loses, nah, they're not going to let TCU lose to Kansas State in the championship and keep them in. Why not? TCU is coming into championship weekend with 0 losses. None. Undefeated. Even if they lose, they would still have 1 loss less than Bama. TCU already beat Kansas State in the regular season. So you really mean to tell me if undefeated TCU takes a loss against a team they've already beaten in the regular season and only has 1 loss, that a 2-loss Alabama is going to take their spot in the playoffs just because TCU had an extra game with an extra loss? You know, if there were no championship games and the season ended today or on Saturday, guess what? TCU's in the playoffs. They did what they were supposed to do. All they have to do is win the Big 12 to solidify their playoff spot even more. And right now, I think it's solidified. But winning would also solidify an amazing season under Sonny Dykes and quarterback Max Duggan, who started as the backup. So no, I do not think if TCU and USC loses that Alabama is going to get in. If TCU loses, they're going to stay. They might drop. If TCU loses and USC wins, USC is going to take the 3 spot and TCU is going to go to the 4 spot. That's the only thing that's going to change. All right? TCU is staying in the playoffs. I don't even think Ohio State would get in if they lost. I think that they're solidified in their spot, and that's just my take.
Yeah, Mason, I have to agree with you, man. I mean, looking at the overall body of work and looking at TCU's season thus far, like you said, if the season ended today on Wednesday and they did not play a championship game, they would be in because they have 0 losses. And they are, like you said, they already beat K-State in the regular season. There's no reason why a Kansas State championship game loss for the Big 12 should impact that at all. Like you said, I agree. If USC wins and TCU was to lose this weekend, then big whoop. USC will take the 3 spot, TCU takes the 4. And if USC loses and TCU loses, I think Ohio State probably takes the 4 over them, or takes the 3 over them, and TCU drops the 4. But either way, there's no way TCU should be out. And if by some bizarre, off-the-wall, impossible chance that TCU was to be out from this loss, and USC lost as well, and Ohio State and Bama both jumped those 3 and 4 guys, the committee would lose all credibility, which is why I don't think there's any possible way that they would do that. So yeah, even with a loss, TCU's in, but with a win, it just locks up a 3 spot for them, whether USC wins or not.
Now, the only thing that I could see happening with TCU, this is maybe a possibility. I don't think it would happen, like I already said, but I think Ohio State could. If USC wins and TCU loses, I think Ohio State may take the spot over TCU. But you got to remember, TCU went undefeated in the regular season in some tough environments against a lot of top 25 teams. Their defense may have not played the greatest, and they definitely had to come back and win in a couple games like Oklahoma State and Baylor. But they proved themselves. They deserve the credit. They earned the credit. They need to be looked at as a team that is definitely in the playoffs, no matter what happens this weekend. So we thank you guys for listening to our reaction. These are just some of our thoughts. If you don't agree, leave a comment. If you agree, leave a comment. Let's have a talk about it. Always remember that no matter what team you pull for, if you're on God's side, you're always on the winning team. God loves you. He wants to have a relationship with you. Redemption in Jesus Christ is very close to the heart of TBD Sportscast. If you ever have any questions about that, you can always hit us up on our Instagram DMs. Hit us up on Facebook Messenger, or just leave a comment on this YouTube video. We'll get back with you. We're praying for you guys. And come check out our episode for Championship Weekend. We're making all of our picks. We're going to do the Championship Weekend preview tomorrow. Come check it out on our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out. Later.
Bye-bye.